Hey everyone, Matt Kearns here. This is my Psalter video. For my first major point, I looked at book 3 of the Psalter, which dealt heavily with a section of laments, and I thought that was pretty representative of the time Israel was in exile. They were, far away from God. They had been unfaithful. They had rebelled. They had done things their own way, and so God's hand of protection was off of them. His hand of judgment was upon them, and so the Babylonians had come and taken them away. And these psalms of sadness and like this kind of doom and gloom highlight section 3, which is indicative of their time away in exile and feeling far from God and not close to Him and out of the land. And yet, not all of the Psalms from that section are laments. There are a few that are praising and joyous, which I think is highlighting the fact that there is a glimmer of hope for them. Despite their current situation, their judgment, and they've rebelled and they've been sent away, God is still up to something. He's still doing something. He's not done with them. And then we see that play out in the rest of the Old Testament into the New Testament. I just thought that was really good. And then my second point that I took away was I looked at book 5, which dealt heavily with psalms of praise, which I thought was interesting because each one of the first 4 books, they each end with praise. So I thought it was fitting that the last book would be all praise, and that's right. That's representative of the Old Testament, as you see there's creation and things are wonderful, but then the rebellion comes and people are unfaithful to God and they get punished. But then God's still doing something. He hasn't given up on them, and there's this hope. The Psalms point towards this new David, this new king that's going to be coming, and so there's this sense of joy at the end. And I think we see that not only in the Old Testament, but we see it in the Bible as a whole as well. At the end, through Revelation, there's going to be this joyous time, and so I really highlighted just the joy that comes at the end. That judgment isn't the end. That joy and praise and being with God is where our finality is. And so then I looked at Psalm 32, was one of my favorite psalms to look at. And it starts out like this: "Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in complete honesty." And this is a psalm of David, and so he's talking about how joyous one can be when their sins are forgiven. And he goes into the middle part of this psalm is his confession: God, I've been unfaithful. I've committed sins against you. But at the end of it is, again, a time of joy because he's able to confess and God is faithful to forgive. He ends with joy and praise. Verse 11 ends like this: "So rejoice in the Lord and be glad, all you who obey him. Shout for joy, all whose hearts are pure." And I just love that again, and sin and just rejection and judgment isn't the final answer. That God is doing something, and it's ultimately going to end with praise and us being in his presence, and it's just going to be wonderful, and that brings joy to my heart. For part 2 of this response, I looked at more of a personal level and value I got from the class. I really enjoyed digging into the different books and seeing how each one of them continued the story and how all these themes kept getting repeated time and time again, and that God is literally highlighted and he's at the center of all of it, which was really good. I mean, even in some of those books where he's not mentioned all that much, like Ruth or Esther, we still see him behind the scenes pulling the strings. We see his fingerprints over all of it. We see his sovereignty, that he's in control despite humans' best attempts to derail things and and just totally screw up his plan. He's in control the entire time, and that gives me sense of peace. And as we look at it in terms of ministry and how this class can impact ministry, as we continue to learn about God's goodness and faithfulness, and that he wants joy and praise to come out of everything, we can look at that in our own lives, that God's in control. And I don't have to be the best, preacher. I don't have to have the best message. And in fact, I'm not going to come in and change people's hearts and minds. That's all on God, and that He's the one who ultimately does the work. I'm just the vessel that He uses to help people. And so when I can take that sort of weight off my own shoulders, then I can have a more enjoyable time in ministry, and I think I can be more effective. I can be more bold. I can be more courageous. I can take bigger risks that I wouldn't be able to, because it's not ultimately on me, but it's on God, and He's the one that's going to be moving and changing hearts, renewing people, bringing them back. This whole thing of reconciliation, and it's just it's really nice to know, and it's really good to feel that I don't have to carry all this weight. God's got it. And there's comfort in that the one who knows everything and sees everything and is all powerful, that He's in control, and I'm just working alongside of Him. And I think that's just a great way for us to go through ministry, is thinking, how can you use me, God? And that's kind of been my prayer lately, is, God, how can you use me? And how can I see your glory today? I love that passage from Shriner earlier. Um, Thank you.